President Biden is expressing outrage over Israel's airstrike on Gaza that killed 7 international aid workers, not mincing words about Israel's failure to protect aid workers and civilians. So will this tragedy be the tipping point for President Biden?
Joining us from Israel is ABC foreign correspondent Britt, and from Washington, D.C., Chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce. Britt, let's start with you. World Central Kitchen founder Chef Jose Andres breaking his silence, accusing Israel of deliberately targeting his aid workers. What has the response been from Israel on this?
Yeah, Eva, Andres said that they were systematically targeted. He said car by car. And there are lots of questions, which is why we're seeing this kind of global outcry over this attack. Satellite imagery clearly shows 3 cars leaving a warehouse on a path which was deemed safe and, you know, that humanitarian aid workers were allowed to travel on. Moments later, the Israeli military fires upon these guys 3 separate times. The workers say they coordinated their movements with the Israeli military. So these are kind of questions I put to a Netanyahu advisor here in Jerusalem, Ophir Falk, who said any accusation that these aid workers were targeted is absurd. He said that the last thing Israel wants is to endanger civilian lives. He added that this is a complex war. He said it was a case of friendly fire, saying that in the fog of war, that Israel too has lost a number of soldiers, a number of IDF soldiers as well as hostages to friendly fire.
And Mary, we do know that World Central Kitchen is asking governments of Australia, Canada, the U.S., Poland and the U.K. to join it in demanding an investigation to determine whether Israel violated international law. So what type of impact do you think this is going to have on the relationship between President Biden and Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, DeMarco, that is really the big question here today. This phone call today between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, the first time they are speaking since these devastating airstrikes killed those 7 aid workers. And as you said, look, we know the president is outraged. He has said he is heartbroken by these killings. And in his strongest rebuke yet this week, he accused Israel of simply not doing enough to protect civilians. And that is the message that the president is delivering directly to Netanyahu today in this conversation. But so far, as we have seen, the prime minister has largely ignored the U.S.'s warnings. And Biden, despite his strong condemnation, so far he has not changed any U.S. policy. He has resisted calls to limit or condition the weapons that the U.S. is sending to Israel for this fight. That's something that critics say is contradictory and hypocritical. So the big question here now is the president going to change course? Will these airstrikes, these deaths of these aid workers, will this be a breaking point in his relationship with Netanyahu going forward?
And Britt, we have to ask about the crisis that's there, because World Central Kitchen saying it's going to suspend its operations after that attack. But there's a real humanitarian crisis. According to UNICEF, 1 in 3 children under 2 years old are acutely malnourished in northern Gaza. So what do you think this will mean as far as the relief efforts there?
Yeah, guys, those are the kind of statistics, grim statistics, aid groups are releasing on a weekly basis now. And now with several of them halting operations in Gaza, it really leaves this gaping hole in the efforts to get this desperately needed aid back to those who need it at any moment. And the situation is growing more desperate by the day. We've been speaking to people in Rafah in the south, families who, on top of having to deal with this daily threat that they may die, are also dealing with this severe shortage of basic things that many of us take for granted. One mother I spoke to said her kids celebrate when water is delivered to their house. Another saying her son was so happy to get an apple for his birthday. In the north, guys, the situation is even more bleak. The UN warning famine is imminent, and now fears of starvation there increasing because aid groups are terrified of the consequences of what could happen when you're just doing your job to bring people aid.
Time is of essence. And back there at the White House, Mary, we learned that the president faced protests during a meeting there at the White House. What more do we know about it?
Yeah, this was supposed to be the annual White House Ramadan celebration, an iftar dinner, but many of those invited said they didn't want a celebration. They wanted a substantive conversation with the president, given their very deep, real concerns about how this war is playing out. In fact, one attendee, a Palestinian American, a doctor who has been spending some time in Gaza treating the wounded, took the opportunity, the White House did turn this into more of a meeting, but he took the opportunity to convey to the president his very real concerns, to share the devastation that he has witnessed himself and seen firsthand in Gaza, shared a letter with the president from an 8-year-old Palestinian with their concerns. The president said he understood, what he was sharing with him, and then this doctor got up and walked out, left the room, left the White House. Now, the White House says, of course, they respect his interest and ability to peacefully protest, but it just goes to show the political pressure is really growing here on this administration, guys.
It is growing indeed. All right, ABC's Mary Bruce and Britt Clennett, thank you very much. We appreciate it and good to see you guys.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.